Hello, I'm Dr. Mikey Mewborn, and this is Leadership Development. Today we're looking at the topic, building credibility. It's so good to be with you today. As we walk through this topic, we're going to look at the reputation of people, leaders especially. Several years ago, I heard a quote from one of my teachers, and he said, "A great speaker is a good person speaking well." You could possibly replace that great speaker with great leader and say a great leader is a good person leading well. And I think that would be appropriate, but the focus of that is credibility, reputation, track record, those types of things. So we're going to look at that today. It's good to be with you. Let's begin our study. Hello and welcome to Leadership Development. Today we're looking at the topic, building credibility. It's good to be with you. Let's begin our study. I want to start with the heading, what people look for and admire in their leaders. So I have a list here of different characteristics that people want: honesty, forward-looking, competence, inspiration, intelligence, fair-mindedness, and then broad-mindedness, supportive, straightforward, dependable, cooperative, determined. When surveys have gone out in the last several years, these are the characteristics that just kept coming back. The top four are honesty, forward-looking, competence, and inspiration. It's not difficult to understand why these are the most commonly listed characteristics that people are looking for, because they speak to true leadership. You want somebody that tells the truth, that's trustworthy and honest, person of integrity. You want someone that's forward-looking. You want somebody that's able to do the job, and you want them to be able to inspire the organization, because if they're not able to do that or inspire a group of people as a director, whatever it might be, if they're not able to do that, it's going to cause a negative feel within the environment. So it's important. But I want us to look at the first thing there, honesty. Every major leadership study produced similar results. Honesty is the most sought after leadership characteristic. And I like this picture here of two people shaking hands. It says honesty. It is still the best policy. The idea there is that people want someone they can trust. If a leader, and let's just take someone that is an administrator or someone that is a boss or employer, that person needs to be trustworthy. If they say they're going to give a promotion or a raise or more opportunity or those types of things, and they never do it, then that is a dishonest display of who they are, or disingenuous. It may not be purposeful, but it continues to happen and they're not taking care of business. Or if they lie about things to get their ways, people will stop trusting them. And if you lose trust in an organization, it's kind of like the idea of losing trust in a marriage. You start to question everything then if you've lost trust. So honesty is biblical. Honesty is moral. Honesty is ethical. In every setting, honesty is so vital for a group of people. I think the reason for that is plain and simple in the Bible. In John 8:44, Jesus called Satan the father of lies. Well, if the worst being that has ever existed is Satan himself, and Jesus calls him the father of lies, then this is the worst type of thing a person can actually do. And I think there's something to that, because if he is the father of lies, that's saying that he is the one who started all of it. He's the one who brought it about. And if he is that, which Jesus clearly says he is, then anybody that's under him, anybody that acts like that, is acting like the devil. So honesty or dishonesty is truly equal to acts of the devil, and that is very scary. I think this is one of the reasons that people want honesty in their leadership, for sure. Then we think about forward-looking. Leaders must envision the future, set goals, chart the course. You kind of see that there with the idea of getting ready to go on a journey. And so this is how they would do that. And previous years, before we had the digital age and before we could look at things through satellites and all of that, they had maps and they had ways of charting and using how the ocean's flowing and the currents are flowing and all those types of things. How do we navigate through the ocean waters and the seas and things like that? And so they would chart a course in order to try to do those types of things to get where they needed to go. And then they'd have a certain amount of supplies on the ship to be able to get there as well. So it's a navigation type of way of doing a nautical terminology of charting a course to plot out the directions of the sea. And so this was important for people. And then display optimism. When we think of someone being forward looking, they're not looking back in maybe the glory days of the past, because that doesn't pay the rent, if I might use that term. That doesn't take care of our families today. You might have had a successful 10 years ago, or a successful story 10 years ago, but that does not keep the lights on today. So what has to happen is a great leader is someone who's moving forward, is taking people on that journey. They can envision the future. They can set goals. They know how to do that. They know how to let out or how to give forth a logical flow of how we're going to get what we need and get to where we need to go. And then they display optimism as they do it. So we can do this, in other words. The next thing is competence. And competence is a wonderful word for us in the idea of leadership development, because we need to know that a leader is able to do what they're tasked to do. And so competent leaders have good reputations, meaning they've done things correctly. They've done things in an honest way as a person of integrity. That's one thing. But they need to have good reputations, and that people recognize their abilities and people can be a reference for them or recommend them. Also, healthy track records. So what they've done in the past has a flow toward good things, or a flow towards success. There is this track record of they're getting better at what they do. So if they're a business person, you can see the track record. They've had major wins along the way, and that's good. Proven character. Now, this goes back to the idea, once again, of honesty, of integrity, but they're proven character because the people around them, as they are watching them, they're seeing that these characteristics that they're seeking after, they're hoping that they have, that they're a positive person, that they are a person who has grit and is able to stick it out when things are not going their way. Also, they're a kind person. They treat people with respect and dignity. It's that type of character that is going to make a person competent, and that's what makes up a competent leader. And then success stories is another thing. Do they have that track record or that reputation of successes? How many times have you heard a business person say, well, I've been in business for 30 years. But if you looked at their track record, they would not have a lot of success stories. Maybe they went into bankruptcy a few times. Maybe they've lost everything. Maybe they can barely put food on the table, yet they call themselves a businessman. Well, there's a very big difference between saying you're a businessman and someone who's successful. What if somebody told you that they are a musician, and you said, oh, that's awesome, I'd love to hear you play. And then you hear them play and it sounds horrible. How long have you been playing, you might ask them. And they say, well, I've been playing for 10 years. You've been a musician for 10 years and you can't even make a chord on the piano, and you're a pianist, you say? And so people start to question that. So you need to have success stories of being able to do things and have a way of showing that track record and that reputation. And then some ministers, or some people that go into the ministry, are expected to have humility, and some would even say a brokenness about them. Now, I said ministers earlier, but really in all areas of life, people want humility. Arrogance is so hard on an organization. When someone constantly boasts about their abilities, yet it seemingly puts down everybody else or makes everybody else feel inadequate, it doesn't have the feel of lifting them up. So a better way to approach that is to say, I'm going to approach it in a humble way and say, hey, I'm still learning. I'm still growing in this process. I'm coming at this with the desire to help everyone around me. If I see my brother or my sister in trouble, I'm going to try to help them. If I see a coworker going through something, I'm going to try to work with them. It's the idea that I can serve people. Jesus Christ served people. He truly did. And he came and made himself lower on the earth just by taking on the form of a servant. If you think about that, he uh, is the perfect master, teacher, Lord of lords, King of kings. He is above all. But what he did was put on flesh and became a servant so that he might save those who were lost. In other words, he came under the law to save those who were under the law, when Jesus Christ clearly was above the law. I mean, if you think about before he came into what we'd say is human existence in that point or put on flesh, he was above all things, but he made himself low. He brought himself under. We read about this in the book of Hebrews. So it's important to see humility. Paul talks a lot about humility before the Lord God Almighty, but in humility, you can still lead people. So a humble person doesn't mean that they're always a follower. You can be a person who is humble yet in the strongest leadership position, recognizing where your um, security comes from, knowing where your salvation comes from. And when we recognize what Christ has done, then humility really becomes what it needs to be. All right. Now, when we talk about reputation, I want to come back to a story that we've alluded to a few times. In Acts chapter 16, and this is talking about the Apostle Paul and Timothy. It says, Paul came also to Derbe and to Lystra. A disciple was there named Timothy. He was well spoken of by the brothers at Lystra and Iconium. So in two towns, they spoke highly of this guy. This guy was a man of reputation. Timothy was an upright person of outstanding character who people recognized, and they said, that guy is the real deal. And so when the Apostle Paul meets him in Acts chapter 16, he asked him, come with me, or requested that he come with the Apostle Paul and do ministry with him. And I think a lot of that is because of his reputation, who he is. You see something more about this in 2 Timothy 1:5. Paul writes to Timothy, I'm reminded of your sincere faith, a faith that dwelt first in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and now I am sure dwells in you as well. Why would he say that I am sure that it dwells in you as well? Because Timothy's reputation that is known in these two towns, it's obvious. But then he's walked with Timothy for a long time and has seen his track record face to face. He's seen him. He's got a front row seat of seeing how Timothy does things. And so he has a great reputation of doing things well. Okay? Then inspiration is another one of the characteristics. Inspiration, motivation arises from what leaders give, not from what they take. Okay? If you look over at this picture, we make a living by what we get. We make a life by what we give. I love that. Be thankful in all things. Show interest in others. Encourage others. Don't criticize too often. Help people assimilate. So we're always working to help people. We're always trying to serve people. I believe that servant leadership is the greatest form of leadership that a person can have. They show somebody how to do it because they're modeling the way. And I think that's important. Inspire and motivate. Number one, the way a person behaves depends on both the person and his environment. So this has a lot to do with how a person is inspired or motivated. Number two, each individual behaves in ways which make sense to him. So you need that. Number three, an individual's perception of a situation influences his behavior in that situation. So if a person is in a setting or environment that is not motivational or inspirational, it's going to affect their job. It's going to affect how they act. It's going to affect how they treat people. So you need that positivity. Number four, An individual's view of himself influences what he does. So if individuals feel that they're appreciated and motivated and inspired, then they're going to act accordingly. And it's going to help produce greater, it's going to produce more work. It's possibly going to just produce a great environment for everyone because people are inspired and motivated. And then fifthly, an individual's behavior is influenced by his needs, which vary from person to person and from time to time. So if there's a way that a leader can work with someone who is a follower and help supply needs, it might be something as simple as self-esteem. It might be something as simple as just being motivated or telling someone they're doing a great job. Words have such meaning, and if good words, motivating words, encouraging and positive words are not coming from leaders, it will greatly impact everyone else around them. Okay? Now, in this idea, Kenneth Gangle in his book Team Leadership talks about this idea of credibility. And I want to just give some points here I think that are important to ask, and maybe some questions to ask here. Is my behavior predictable or erratic? So good leaders, they have predictable behavior. They have this competence about them. And you know what you're going to get when you are around them. Number two, do I communicate clearly or carelessly? Number three, do I treat promises seriously or lightly? Remember what we said at the beginning of this lesson. Honesty is still the best policy. It's the idea that this is a characteristic we have to have. And then, am I forthright or dishonest? Building credibility takes some work. It takes time. It's not something that happens overnight. Have you ever heard the saying before? It takes years to build up a good reputation. It takes 1 minute to destroy it. Well, if you're going to build credibility in your life, and you're going to build up a strong reputation and a great track record, then you're going to have wins. You're going to have successes. You're going to have to come at that with humility. You're going to have to be a person who sees the bigger picture. And ultimately, I would say this, you have to be a great follower of the Lord Jesus Christ, or it's not going to take place. You're going to be boastful. You're going to be a person who can easily become dishonest or maybe disingenuous. Maybe you're going to be a person who's trying to spin things instead of truly go through it in the right way. And so we have to be careful about that. I want to end here with this idea of strong friendships because I think this is helpful for us. Under building credibility, like strong friendships, leaders should exemplify the following: empathy. Show concern for people and be able to go through things with people. That's important. Selflessness. Coming at situations from a humble heart is a great way to live the life. Trustworthiness. It goes back to the idea of honesty and integrity. Concern for others. This kind of goes with empathy, but it's showing concern. It's actually doing things when people are down and out, or people need a hand up or a lift, whatever it might be. And then humility. Coming at things from a humble heart. A true friend accepts who you are, but also helps you become who you should be. Leaders are very good at this. Leaders are people that come alongside and they see where you are and they understand it, and they don't beat you down and they don't treat you like garbage, but instead they lift you up. They give you a hand up. And it's this idea of taking someone to a better place because you know it will go better for them. That's an idea of selflessness, all right? Well, this has been the teaching on building credibility. It is so good to be with you today. God bless you. Bye-bye. All right, that concludes our study today about building credibility. This is a wonderful study as we look at things such as honesty, forward thinking, inspiration, competence. All of these characteristics matter when we think about leadership development, of course, when we're building credibility. So as you think through these things, I encourage you to work hard to make sure that we're living life without regret, that people aren't looking at us and saying, wow, I can't follow them because of this in their life, but instead live life as we live for Christ and making sure that Christ is glorified in all that we do. It's so good to be with you. God bless you, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.